At the Wouda steam pumping station outside Lemmer, an engineer eases open a brass valve, and Dirk Frederik Wouda's great steam engine begins shoving floodwater back over the dike, toward the water it drained a century ago. At Kinderdijk, a miller climbs the wooden stair inside a windmill his family has tended for generations and leans his shoulder into a beam to turn the cap toward the morning wind. In Nieuwerkerk aan den IJssel, a woman fills a kettle at the kitchen tap, and the water she pours rests 6.76 meters below the North Sea outside her window. This is the Netherlands, a country where about a quarter of the land lies beneath the level of the sea, and almost none of that ground was a gift from nature. Close to 17 million people live on soil that would vanish the moment the pumps fell silent. And though those pumps have run for 8 centuries, for one night in 1953, the machines were not enough. What follows is the story of the water, the mills, the councils, and the moving walls, of a people who built their own country and have never been allowed to stop.
Morning comes slowly to Nieuwerkerk aan de IJssel, a quiet suburb east of Rotterdam, where the streets are flat, the gardens are trimmed, and a small roadside plaque stands almost unnoticed among the parked cars. The sign reads -6.76 meters, and it marks the lowest point in the Netherlands, among the lowest inhabited ground in Western Europe. Out beyond the houses spreads the Zuidplaspolder, a stretch of drained land where people sleep, cook, and raise their children far below the tide line. There is nothing dramatic in the view, no cliff, no chasm, only ordinary homes sitting far below a sea they cannot see. And it is precisely that ordinariness that unsettles, because the ground here stays dry for one reason only. Somewhere, always, something is working to keep the water out. That work has a cathedral, and it stands to the north at Lemmer, in the province of Friesland, where the D.F. Wouda steam pumping station has run since 1920. Inside, the air smells of oil and warm iron. Riveted flywheels turn as tall as a house. Brass gauges tremble against their glass, and a single valve, eased open by hand, sets the largest steam-driven pumping engine ever built into slow, deliberate motion. When the modern electric pumps fall behind, when the rain is relentless and the rivers rise, the old machine at Lemmer is still woken, and it drags the standing water up out of the low country and delivers it to the rivers. Here, drainage is a public monument, tended and preserved out in the open. The Dutch have long understood that the thing keeping them alive deserves to be seen. Long before steam, the wind did this labor. At Kinderdijk, 19 windmills stand in a line along a green dike, their sails turning against a wide, flat sky, and they have drained the surrounding land since the 1740s. Each mill is a machine and a home at once, worked for generations by the miller families who raised their children to the groan of turning gears and the creak of timber overhead. Inside one of them, a kettle waits on a wooden shelf beside the great central axle, close enough that the whole room shivers when the sails catch. And at first light, the miller climbs the ladder, presses a thumb to the gears, and comes away with grease dark on his palm. What these mills protect is a polder, a patch of drained ground ringed by dikes and kept dry only by constant pumping. Everything below the dike exists because the mills once pumped it into being. That drained ground has a name, the Alblasserwaard, and to walk it is to see the trick laid bare. For the fields sit visibly lower than the canal running alongside them, the water held up above the land like a held breath. Where almost everywhere else on Earth water runs downhill to the sea, a single drop that falls on a pasture here can only climb to reach it, lift it stage by stage, from field ditch to storage basin to river, rising upward the whole way, the entire landscape plumbed and pumped like the inside of a house. It is a staircase of water running the wrong direction, and it never stops climbing. And it is not only farmland that lives down here. To the west lies the Haarlemmermeer, which was an open inland lake until the 1850s. A body of water wide enough to swallow ships in a storm, drained dry within a single decade by pumps and dikes and patience. Today, its bed carries suburban streets, schoolyards, and the runways of Schiphol, one of the busiest airports in Europe, so that where sailors once crossed open water, families now sleep, commuters queue, and aircraft touch down several meters below the level of the sea. The lake is gone. A working world stands on its floor. The pumps never stop. So the next question is simple. Who decided centuries ago that they never would?
The water that must be lifted must first be paid for. And that reckoning arrives, as it always has, on the kitchen table. In Dordrecht, the oldest city in the Netherlands, chartered in 1220, a resident sets a cup of morning coffee beside a plain envelope from the waterschap, the water board. And folded inside is the annual levy that every household here still pays for the single service of staying dry. Long before there was a kingdom of the Netherlands, before there was a king at all, the neighbors of low, wet places like this one bound themselves to a shared duty against the flood, electing councils whose only task was to keep the ground above the water. The oldest of these boards were meeting and voting in the 13th century, some 600 years before the crown that now sits above them. Here, democracy began with the plain arithmetic of who would pay to mend which stretch of dike. That same instinct built the towns. In Haarlem, the streets open onto a broad market square, ringed by merchant houses, a great church, and a public weigh house where goods were once measured and taxed. And the whole arrangement is a machine for governing, its beauty almost incidental. The burghers of such cities gathered to argue out the unglamorous business of maintenance, apportioning the cost of every dike, every sluice, and every drained field among the households that stood to benefit. This habit, repeated across the centuries, made of the Dutch a people practiced in sitting down together and settling accounts. It is a democracy of upkeep, government understood as the steady shared labor of keeping a low country from slipping back beneath the water. In Delft, a quiet brick courtyard beside a still canal holds the memory of the moment that habit became a nation. Here, in the Prinsenhof, the Dutch Republic took shape. A state stitched together by consensus, by provinces that agreed to hold together against a common threat. That old reflex of governing by agreement rather than by command runs unbroken to the present day, and it surfaces in a detail almost too fitting to believe, for the current king, Willem-Alexander, made his name away from any battlefield or palace in the study of water, as chair of the United Nations Secretary-General's Advisory Board on Water and Sanitation. The monarch of a country wrung from the sea is, by training, an expert in the very element his ancestors spent 8 centuries fighting. There is nothing accidental in that. The medieval promise has not softened with age, it has only grown larger. North of the old cities, a single dike road runs arrow straight across the water, dividing the open sea from the freshwater lake that engineers made of it, vanishing toward a horizon it never seems to reach. It is the same vote the waterboards cast 800 years ago, now poured in stone and clay across a former inland sea. The council's modest medieval mandate, carried out, had the scale of an entire nation. The reward for all that patient governing is solid ground. And on that ground, carried on the wind of the wet pastures, comes the low sound of cattle and the smell of milk turning slowly into cheese.
The pasture that carries that smell of cheese did not exist 400 years ago, for the cattle now standing knee-deep in grass graze on the floor of a vanished lake. North of Amsterdam lies the Beanster, a polder pumped dry in 1612 and set out by its makers in a strict grid of straight roads, parallel ditches, and rectangular fields. A whole landscape drawn with a ruler and laid some 3.5 meters below the level of the sea.
The men who drained it did not simply remove the water. They composed what would replace it, dividing the old lake bed into clean squares of pasture and lining the lanes with trees, so that even today the district reads as a diagram made solid. It is among the oldest planned landscapes in Europe, protected now as a monument of World Heritage. And across its measured fields move the black and white dairy cattle, whose milk begins the slow work that ends in a wheel of cheese. The beanster was only the first of many. Close by, the Schirmer was pumped dry a generation later in 1635, emptied by rings of windmills that lifted its water out in stages. The staircase trick of Kinderdijk worked upon an entire inland lake. Together, these drained districts and dozens like them frame what the Dutch call the Green Heart, the belt of open pasture and peat meadow deliberately kept clear of building at the centre of the country's ring of cities. Here the ground is soft and wet and low, unfit for much beyond grass. And grass is exactly what the dairy trade requires. So the reclaimed land that could not easily carry houses came instead to carry cows. There are more of those cows than the country's low fields would suggest, and the black and white Holstein Friesian, bred over generations for the sheer volume of its milk, has become one of the most productive dairy animals on Earth. Morning and evening, the herds are brought in and milked, and the milk moves quickly from the byre to the vat, where it is warmed, set with rennet, and turned, over hours of patient labour, into curd. In a farmhouse in the Green Heart, a cheesemaker lowers bare arms into a vat of warm curd and begins to work it by hand, cutting and stirring and pressing the day's milk toward the shape it will hold for years. The same craft practiced on these drained meadows since long before the machines arrived. The cheese those hands produce carries the name of a single town. Gouda has held a cheese market since 1395, and at its centre stands the old weigh house, built in 1668, where wheels were once carried in, weighed, haggled over, and stamped. On market mornings, the cheese is still handled by the kaasdragers, the cheese carriers, in their white clothes and lacquered straw hats, who bear the heavy wheels on wooden barrows in the old manner. Inside a cool warehouse nearby, a man in white gloves moves along a rack of ripening wheels, knocks a knuckle against each one, and leans close to listen, reading in the sound whether the year sealed inside has been a good one. All of it, the market, the herds, the pasture, and the town, rests on ground the Dutch took from the water and must hold against it still.
The tide that was pushed back to make these meadows never surrendered its claim, and it keeps, always, the patience to return. It did not have to wait long.
For 3 centuries, the bargain held. The North Sea kept out, and the pasture kept dry. And the people of the Low Country learned to sleep soundly behind their dikes. Then, on the final night of January 1953, the bargain broke. A deep storm wheeled down from the north across the North Sea and arrived at the worst possible hour, driving a surge of water southward just as a spring tide was already lifting the tide toward its height. Along the coast of Zeeland, the province of low islands where the great rivers empty into the sea, the water rose higher than the dikes had ever been built to hold. And in the black early hours of the 1st of February, in more than 150 places at once, the dikes gave way. On the island of Schouwen-Duiveland and across the scattered farms of Zeeland, families woke to a sound they could not place. The sound of cold water moving through their houses in the dark. No warning had reached them in time, no siren and no call. Only the water climbing past the bed and the blind scramble for the stairs, and then the attic, and then, as the attic filled, the roof. On one roof, a father braced his back against the chimney and held his 2 small children above the water through the freezing hours before dawn, watched the neighboring house fold into the current, and waited for a daylight that showed him only water where his fields had lain. By the time the water drew back, 1,836 people had drowned in the Netherlands in a single night. Tens of thousands of cattle had been lost, and more than 150,000 hectares of hard-won land had returned within hours to the sea that made it. The country has remembered it ever since by one plain word: de ramp, the disaster. The water was in no hurry to leave. Across Zeeland and the neighboring islands, some 70,000 people were carried from their homes by boat, many of them to shelter far inland, and they would not return for months. In the fortified village of Willemstad, with its low, star-shaped ramparts thrown up centuries before against a human enemy, and in the small harbour of Kolijnsplaat on the far shore, the survivors counted the missing and drew the drowned from the flooded fields. The last and largest breach on Schouwen-Duiveland, near the village of Nieuwerkerk, resisted every effort through the summer and was not sealed until the 4th of November, when 4 great concrete caissons were floated into the gap on the tide and sunk at last into place. The Netherlands answered its dead in the only way it knew: by building. The engineer, Johan van Veen, who had warned for years before the flood that the sea defences of the southwest were dangerously low, had already sketched the outline of a barrier system on a scale never before attempted. He died in 1959, before the greatest of it was finished. But the plan carried his name forward. In the decades that followed, the country threw a chain of dams, sluices, and barriers across the mouths of the southern rivers, sealing the open estuaries where the water had poured through. And the vast Oosterschelde storm surge barrier, completed in 1986, crowned the work, a promise that no night like 1953 would come again. The lesson was then carried north, toward the great river mouth that still lay open, toward the place where the country would build the moving wall that guards it now.
Where the River Rhine finishes its long journey to the North Sea near the Hook of Holland, two white steel arms lie waiting along the banks of a busy shipping channel, each arm reaching some 237 meters across the water, each one heavier than the Eiffel Tower entire. And together, they are the largest moving structure ever built by human hands. This is the Nieuwerkerk, completed in 1997 as the final seal on the Delta Works. And for most of the year, it rests open, letting the great container ships pass freely to and from Rotterdam, the busiest port in Europe. But when a storm surge climbs out of the North Sea and turns toward the city behind it, a computer, watching the water level without pause, orders the two arms to swing shut across the channel, and they float out, take on water, sink to the bottom, and close the country's front door against the ocean. No hand turns a wheel. No official gives the word. The decision is made between the rising water and the machine that waits for it, and the wall moves whether or not a single person is there to watch. Behind that moving wall lives the crowded heart of the nation, the Randstad, the great ring of cities that binds Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, and Utrecht into one another, holds close to 8 million people, many of them going about their days on ground that sits well below the line of the tide. It is among the most densely settled regions in Europe. It is also among the most mixed. Roughly a quarter of the country's people carry a migration background, born abroad or born to parents who were, and in Amsterdam and Rotterdam, that share climbs to about half. A nation assembled plank by plank from reclaimed water has become, fittingly enough, a nation assembled from newcomers. Its oldest trick and its newest population sharing the same reclaimed ground. Nowhere is the arrangement stranger than in Amsterdam itself, where the 17th century canal ring, dug in the age of the merchant fleets and guarded now as a monument of world heritage, threads through a city that lies roughly 2 meters beneath the level of the sea. Cyclists cross the humped bridges, boats idle in the canals, and cafes spill out along the water.
all of it resting below the reach of the waves, held off somewhere beyond the rooftops. The city carries none of the air of a place under siege. It wears instead the ease of people who have arranged, through 800 years of stubborn effort, never to have to think about the sea at all. To the northeast lies ground younger than many of the people who walk upon it. The whole province of Flevoland was raised from the bed of a former inland sea in the 20th century, drained according to the designs of the engineer Cornelius Lely, who died in 1929, years before the water he had studied was finally driven back, and the land he had imagined rose dripping into the air. The province's largest city, Lelystad, still carries his name. In a kitchen there, in a town that did not exist within living memory, a family lays out plates on a table that stands on what was open water when the grandparents were young. The children, many of them the first people ever born on this exact patch of earth, eat their evening meal on the floor of a drowned sea, without once thinking to wonder at it. And still the making goes on. Out in the shallow Markermeer, a cluster of new islands called the Marker Vadden has been raised from the lake bed since 2016, built this time for birds and reeds and shallow open water instead of streets and houses. The country has not finished adding to itself even now. The Netherlands remains an ongoing act, a thing still being done. And far to the south, in the quiet suburb where this story began, the water still waits 6.76 meters below a kitchen window. Patient, held back, and never for a single hour left unattended. At Kinderdijk, the light that rose over the miller at dawn has drained from the sky, and he descends the steep timber steps by the glow of a lamp, latching the door on the turning shaft and leaving the sails to turn through the dark, as the families of these 19 mills have left them turning for close to 300 years. Far to the south, in a Nieuwerkerk kitchen, a tap runs briefly and falls quiet. Beyond the dark fields, an electric pump takes up the same labor the mills began. Nothing announces it. Nothing ever has. Below sea level, the pumps do not stop.